Historians have long been aware that the ancient origin of Hindu beliefs and customs arose from an ancient ritualized use of a mysterious, mind and mood-altering drug plant. This botanical stimulant was known as Soma to early Aryan communities of farmers and cattlemen, numerous allied tribes of which settled vast swaths of South and Central Asia before the dawn of literacy. The general character and historical significance of the Soma plant have puzzled modern Hindu communities, as well as Western scholars, because the identity of this plant was lost somehow along India's historical way. The native term for this vegetative sacrament, Soma, also refers to an ambrosial drink that was prepared from the plant's milky sap, just as the term Soma can also refer to a plant god, a specific plant god, who is addressed as Soma Pavamana during prehistoric performances of the so-called Soma sacrifice. So the quest to identify the botanical source of India's famous Soma drink might be regarded as India's own, holy grail. But this would be a grail that left much more traceable evidence in South Asia's historical records than did the holy grail of Arthurian legends in European records. The oldest known texts that record details of the Soma plant's physical characteristics and early use among Indo-Aryan priest guilds of South Asia were composed and preserved originally in the language of Sanskrit. And these traditional scriptures actually represent some of the oldest known historical records of an Indo-European language. They comprise a collection of hymnals, or samhitas, compilations as they would say, that preserve the sacred chants, the mantras, that once accompanied the practice of Soma drinking sessions more than 3,000 years ago. Linguistic evidence makes clear that Indo-Aryan hymns were composed before the advent of writing and must have been conserved then for many centuries, if not for millennia, by means of memorable, formally metered liturgical verses. Aryan priests referred to these hymnals and to later interpretive commentaries on the hymns as the Vedas. The word Veda meaning sacred knowledge or religious lore. Special knowledge, then. And by tradition, 4 classes of these traditional hymns were passed from generation to generation by word of mouth before they were recorded in script, perhaps some 2,800 years ago, give or take a few centuries. The oldest and most celebrated collection of these hymns are contained in a samhita known as the Rig Veda, which includes more than 1,000 prehistoric chants. Many of these chants are thought to be around 4,000 years old, although some of them may well be much older in age. Rigvedic hymns were sung in ceremonies that praised the spirits of the Aryan's natural world for assisting Brahmanic bards in procuring a steady and reliable source of harvestable Soma stems. And they expressed their gratitude to the gods in mythical terms. They, in fact, involved themselves with the mythical lives of the gods and goddesses of the Vedas. Another group of songs were recorded in the Samaveda, a few entries of which were copied directly from the Rig Veda, but other selections were sometimes composed to be accompanied by musical instruments and by singers. And then there was the Yajurveda, which comprises unmetered chants that served a variety of religious ceremonies, and these often provide some particularly useful insights into early Aryan mythology. And then finally, a more derivative class of chants comprises the Atharva Veda, and this collection includes a sampling of spells and cures for all sorts of physical and spiritual maladies or conditions, in addition to early metaphysical speculations of the early Vedic singers. So it would seem that essentially all sacred scriptures that are attributed to Indo-Aryan religious expression relate directly to the use of a truly euphoric plant that had quite an impressive impact on the human psyche. I choose the term euphoric intentionally to describe the effects of the Soma plant because this term, Greek in origin, means literally a carrier of truth, euphoric. And that is precisely the role that Aryan priests attributed to their celebrated plant of the gods. It carried the truth. Vedic verses make clear that the ritual use of the Soma plant was centered in a territory that Sanskrit speakers refer to as the Panchab, our Punjab in the modern day. This word, meaning literally Panch, 5, Ab, rivers or waters, the place of the 5 rivers. And the rivers to which this term refers are Himalayan in origin and drain into the northern plains of Pakistan and northwestern India. Before passing out of the Punjab, they converge to form the mighty Indus River, a geologically significant body of water that passes through Pakistan's vast arid interior before reaching the Arabian Sea. Despite the wholly unappreciated role of psychotropic plant use in the practice of religion among early civilized human societies, early Western translators of the Vedic hymns in the 19th century were fully aware very early on that no known religious cult or community in modern India makes use of a plant extract or a plant that has the reputed psychotropic properties of Soma. Nor have modern investigators arrived at any agreement as to what plant species of South Asia was involved in the achievement of spiritual revelation in days of yore. Nevertheless, Hindu traditionalists today even still continue to conserve their sacred verses in their original form of archaic Sanskrit. And they do so by using the traditional method of sharing and memorizing these historical records by word of mouth, teaching them orally. And this being the case, modern singers of the Vedic hymns are fully aware that the ancient Soma sacrifice was the primary means by which their forebears experienced the presence of their Creator in themselves. Atonement with the God of creation has always been the veritable goal of all Brahmins, and the process requires assistance from a host of natural spirits that serve as spiritual intermediaries between the Creator and humanity. All of these spirits, including various sun gods, a moon god, many earth and rivering goddesses, along with the so-called sky gods, the devas, meaning the shiners, shared in the bounties of the Soma sacrifice. since they were provided portions of the sacrament during the ritual by the throwing of plant extract from ladles into the flames of a fire altar. This practice was conserved on the basis of a belief that the Soma extracts were required for the Aryan gods and goddesses also depended on Soma extracts to maintain their own immortal lives. A widely published modern Sanskrit specialist by the name of Wendy Doniger from the University of Chicago recognizes the Soma plant as the quintessential ingredient to the spiritual lives of Indo-Aryan tribalists, noting that, and I shall quote here, "The history of the search for Soma is properly the history of Vedic studies in general, as the Soma sacrifice was the focal point of the Vedic religion." And then she adds, "The vision granted by the Soma plant and the nature of that vision and the nature of that plant underlies the whole of Indian religion. Everything," she opines, "of a mystical nature with the religion is pertinent to the identity of the plant." Unquote. And that's a mouthful. That's quite a statement. But I might also add that, just as well, everything about the identity of the plant is pertinent to understanding the mystical nature of India's spiritual past. Yet we have no idea what plant species was behind these ritual practices. And it is equally astounding to consider that relatively few Hindu enthusiasts in the West, or even many Hindus of tropical Asia, are entirely unaware that the use of a drug plant inspired the birth and early developments of Hinduism, of Buddhism and Jainism in India, as well as Zoroastrianism in ancient Iran and Central Asia. That accounts for half of the so-called great religions of the modern world, whose primary focus, it would seem, was centered on the shamanic use of a singular psychotropic plant. So just ponder that for a second. There are several reasons why the identity of the Soma plant has proven elusive to modern linguists, to historians, mythologists, and archaeologists. For one, the use of the Soma plant was the privilege of an elite stratum of early Indian societies during an age in which India's caste system first came into play some 3,000 years ago. The most prestigious of the four traditional classes was the priest caste, the Brahmins. And they were the main proprietors of the Soma ritual. They were the individuals of a tribe that learned Sanskrit to perform the Soma sacrifice. Their caste members were determined primarily by birthright to male members of a family. So participation in the Soma rites was somewhat exclusive. Next in line, however, were prominent members of the Kshatriya, or warrior caste, of ancient India, which included royalty and militarists, some of whom also participated in Soma drinking sessions. But at some unknown time in India's distant past, perhaps during the age in which Islamic Mughals controlled the north of India, the practice of drinking the so-called nectar of immortality was abandoned. Another impediment to the long-held hope of ever determining the identity of the Soma plant is the lack of botanical investigations on this historical matter. Almost every scholarly contribution to this subject has been presented by individuals that are specialized in the field of linguistics, Sanskritists for the most part. But this field of study is hardly suited to solve what is essentially a complicated botanical riddle. And since the subcontinent of India stakes claim to more than 15,000 different land plant species, most of which are restricted to a small portion of the subcontinent's rich and diversely vegetated landscapes, the task at hand is, to say the least, challenging. And what's more, no career botanist, so far as I can tell, and I've scoured the literature for decades, has ever delved into this aspect of Indian history in a thorough and systematic manner. That seems strange to me. And in my opinion, this is why so little progress has been made in resolving this compelling facet of India's secretive past. Linguists and historians have often claimed that the Soma ritual was lost and forgotten shortly after the Vedic era, perhaps around 2,500 years ago, largely on account of occasional references in scriptural texts of this age to the use of quote-unquote substitute plants, imposter plants, so to say, to perform the Soma sacrifice. But I would maintain that such reports don't deny the use of Soma. No, they confirm that authentic stashes of Soma were likely circulating during these time periods. For why would anybody speak of a substitute plant if they did not know the recognizable difference between a bogus alternative from the real thing? That is, after all, how it works out today, right? Another school of thought has hypothesized that the overexploitation of this highly prized sacrament may have resulted in the plant's local extirpation, or perhaps complete extinction. Yet, Brahmanic mythic and scriptural sources that were penned around 500 BC and later, all younger than 2,500 years of age, indicate that the use of Soma as a ritual sacrament continued well past the dawn of our Common Era, likely as late as the second millennium AD, both in India and in Iran. And it is just incomprehensible to me, a student of biogeography, that a plant whose use as a divine inebriant on the banks of the Caspian Sea to the Gangetic plains of northern India would go extinct within a matter of a few centuries. That just doesn't happen, and it makes no sense. Because when villagers or highly organized civilized societies depend on a particular plant for food or medicine, they simply learn to cultivate it. And if history tells us anything, it's that farmers pick up plant cultivation practices pretty quickly. So I feel relatively certain that India's celebrated plant of the gods is still out there, somewhere, even if it has a much diminished geographic distribution at this point in time. The Soma experience laid the foundations for early modes of Brahmanic expression, religious expression. And these modes of thought, in turn, set the stage for the development of various derived schools of religion that we now identify as schools of Hinduism. These Brahmanic sects, and I emphasize that term in the plural, share a common belief that what we experience in the natural world is no more than a painful delusion, a world illusion, and moreover, they believe that this painful dream world, which we all struggle through, with our boundless desires and excessive expectations, is transcended when the Soma drink takes hold of the mind and reveals to the drinker the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. This perspective totally contradicts, of course, the popular worldview of our present age, which perceives drug-induced perceptions as delusory and as nothing more than an escape from the present. The Indo-Aryans, in contrast, perceived our so-called real world, the here and now, as we understand it through science, as a delusion. And the state of mind in which one fell under the sway of the Soma beverage was truth. So who would be right on this count? And how would we know without first experiencing the impacts of a swig of Soma? So Soma, in the context not of a plant but of a plant extract, was often referred to in the scriptures as amrita, meaning in Sanskrit, undying, immortal, literally non-death. Non-mrita, death, as in anti-mortem. And the word amrita can also be used as a noun to refer to the stimulating beverage itself, because sips of the plant's sap, the amrita, were said to confer a divine state of being that the Aryans describe as immortality, amrita. At least in the mind's eye of both Indo and Perso-Aryan bards. One often quoted refrain from both the Rik and the Yajurvedas state the case as such: we have drunk the Soma, we have become immortal, we have seen the light, we have found the gods. What now can the enmity, what can the treachery of mortal man do to us now, O immortal one? The immortal one referring to Soma, the immortal plant god. So Vedic priests drink amrita to become amrita, immortal, to become his god. And that's not all. Other side effects of the nectar of the gods was described in the most sensational of terms. They proclaim that the drink conferred vigor, longevity, intelligence, elation, and ultimately wisdom, or what some verses describe as a pure and clear vision of Satya, the truth. Some passages describe the feeling as a fleeting moment of omniscience, or as one's arrival to a sorrowless state of and place of being, which they perceived, apparently, as timeless. In short, Soma libations induce a blissful, ecstatic state of mind that underpins all that we consider mystical in Indian mythology and theology. So let's just be frank. Prehistoric Aryans had better drugs than you do. The plant god, and the liquid extract, all known as Soma, one word, are facets of the Vedic experience that Aryan bards describe as a mystery, a sacred and secret mystery, which they describe as guha, secret, hidden. And the plant and extract were also the greatest of treasures, ratna in Sanskrit, a man could have, a man could know of. Soma, it was said, is the secret of the gods, or the great secret of the Aryan clans. And accordingly, the holy rites of Aryan priests were to be practiced in secret, guha. For as one Vedic verse states the case, great are the secret names and riddles of the mystery. To quote it once again from Wendy Doniger's commentaries on Vedic verses, She notes that the riddles in the Rig Veda are particularly maddening because many of them are looking glass riddles, referring to Lewis Carroll's enigmatic quotes in Alice in Wonderland. She then states with an air of palpable confidence that the riddles, and I quote, she says, do not have, nor are they meant to have answers. They are not merely rhetorical, but are designed to present one half of a Socratic dialogue through which the reader becomes aware of the inadequacy of his certain knowledge. So, the inadequacies of a person's certain knowledge. Well, that's one viewpoint of a person that clearly does not actually understand the riddles, because she, like the rest of us, has never had the privilege of attending the initiation rites of a Vedic drinker. To be sure, Indo-Aryan hymns phrase their secretive refrains in elusive language, usually by combining a slew of metaphorical allusions to describe some notable physical aspect or psychological impact of the Soma plant. So I assume that the failure of linguists to identify the plant sacrament might also be attributed, at least in part, to the Aryan penchant for cryptic inferences in symbolic, metaphorical, and allegorical terms of reference. They meant it to be that way. Hidden, they say, secret, a mystery. And to this day, centuries of scholarly studies have yet to understand what the Aryans were actually singing about. Nonetheless, clues and relevant morsels of botanical inferences can be easily gleaned from the repetitive uses of Vedic metaphors. And each of these can be examined individually or considered in terms of their patterned use in such a manner as to readily reveal, in my botanical opinion, the identity of the mystery plant. So with this brief introduction, we are now prepared to delve into the mythic and artistic world of the Brahmins through our videos and podcasts on the Soma cult, in our programs on Vedism, Hinduism, Buddhism, and Zoroastrianism, 4 great religions. I think you will find in these programs that the answer to the question of Soma's botanical identity has always been right under our noses.